Good morning. Welcome to Shields and Arrows, where we defend the faith, the family, and the fellowship. I want to let you know the reason why we did not go live yesterday was because it was my wife and my anniversary, our anniversary. Anyways, 7 years of her putting up with me, and so I was not available. We were out traveling, doing things to celebrate, so hopefully you can forgive me. Let's see here. So we have a few things that I want to talk about today. We're primarily going to spend most of our time discussing our study on Abraham and the reason for it. I think that it's important that you know my mindset behind it, and I've tried to communicate that with you in the sessions we've had, but the great opportunity is for people who don't necessarily watch it, because I do, for the most part, think that it seems like Shields and Arrows may get more views than our Bible studies. And so, honestly, I would much rather it be the other way around. I would rather it be that you watch the Bible studies and the sermons far more than you watch the regular daily show, because that's when the real Bible study takes place. So what I want to do is spend a little bit of time talking about it in case there's somebody out there who is watching this but is not taking the time to watch the Abraham study, or any of our other studies for that matter. And so I hope that by the end of today, I can persuade you that you are missing out on a lot. So with all that being said, glad that you could join us for this. We're going to be talking about Abraham. We're also going to be spending a little bit of time talking about the interesting news events. Just a couple key things, okay? Two primary things that I want to spend a little bit of time talking about first. So I'm going to make you have to wait until we get to the Abraham part, because I want you to hear me discuss a couple of these other matters, all right, that are at hand. So here we go. First thing I want to talk about today is really an interesting and strange story. Back in 2021, there was a gentleman who was murdered in a road rage incident, and he was shot to death at a traffic light. And quite interestingly, you know, the victims get to give their statements to the killer, the victim impact statement. And normally when this is done, it's done by, you know, a loved one, the mother, the wife, the son, the daughter of the victim. In this interesting case, though, the victim impact statement was a video that showed some footage of the victim beforehand, before he was killed. And then there was an image of him, and then AI was used to make a video of him talking about his own death. Quite strange. What I'm going to do is I am going to show you a little bit of this video, and I want you to watch it, and then I want to hear your thoughts.
Just to be clear for everyone seeing this, I am a version of Chris Pelkey recreated through AI that uses my picture and my voice profile. I was able to be digitally regenerated to share with you today. But here is insight into who I actually was in real life. Take a look.
All right, I'm Chris Pelkey. I served with the United States Army in the infantry. I'm from upstate New York. And what else?
Where'd you deploy?
Where'd I deploy? I went to Baghdad in 2006, 2008, and then I went to Afghanistan in 09 to 10. I think the number one thing is God, is having a relationship with the Lord and being close with Him. And
so now you can see the and whatever may have showed up down there below on suggested videos. I don't know. That's on YouTube. So you can see how he is speaking in this particular moment. This is recorded video prior to his murder, but the beginning of it was obviously AI. You could tell it didn't quite look natural, the way his face moved, things like that. Now, the video was done actually by some of his own family. It was created by, I believe it was his sister. Her sister and her husband used AI, whatever AI technology that they chose, to make this AI generated video of him speaking, or the AI speaking as if it's him, mimicking him. And, it goes on, and one of the statements that he says is the only thing, or the video says, the generated image says, because it's not him speaking. The only thing that kept entering my head, here's a line. It is a shame we encountered each other that day in those circumstances. In another life, we probably could have been friends. Like, that was one of the lines that he says in the course of this video. What I really want to ask you is, does that sit well with you? Okay, the idea, this concept of we have a murder victim. This is a man who has been killed, and yet using computers, we have taken an image of him, created it, manufactured it digitally. We've recorded his voice enough to be able to copy his speech patterns to some degree. And then we have made it as if this man is speaking to his killer, his murderer. I don't know, to me it doesn't seem right. It does not seem appropriate. And what's interesting is his sister's the one that did it. It's not that somebody else did it. Somebody that we would imagine loves and cares about him. And I'm not trying to credit to her any ill will in any way. And it may be very tempting to use that technology. I've seen people that I know personally use AI to make a photograph come to life. Maybe it's your great-grandfather who passed away in 1960, and he's waving. You can make the image come to life, and he smiles and starts to wave, and your great-grandma's there too, what have you. I can understand the temptation there because it does make it seem like, hey, there they are. But the fact that he is that's not real, okay? The image that you saw of that man talking, he's not that's not actually the victim, okay? And we know that. I don't think that it is something that is good. It's not natural, because when we think about movies and different things, we can create amazing things with cameras and technology, right? We can create we can create images that portray a new world, that portray all these different things, but those are fantasy, right? But when you take a real person and you genuinely try to present it as, hey, this is him really speaking. This is really his words. Really, you are taking words and putting it in his mouth as if this is what he would say if he could speak today about his own murder. And I think that most of you, I'd imagine, and if somebody here today doesn't feel the sense of, hey, this is not natural, there's something off about this, let me know. If you think there's a justification for it, if you think there's something about it that you find to be of value or worthwhile or is a useful tool, by all means, let me know what you think. But I have a feeling that most people who would watch that would just feel that there's something about it that's not right. And the truth is, this sense of what is good and true and natural, I think it expands beyond a whole lot more than just stuff like this. That there is kind of built into people, whether you want to credit to the knowledge of good and evil. Man knows what's good, man knows what's evil. And man's reasoning and convictions can be darkened, certainly through misdirection, lies, deceit, just becoming callous to wickedness and sin. There's all those things that can happen. But within man, there is, to a degree, this innate understanding of what is not right. And it takes great deception. I noticed that Toby mentions getting close to Revelation 13:15. Is that the passage of the beast speaking, the image of the beast, giving power there. There's a number of ways to interpret it. And certainly, at the very least, the idea of AI images speaking, yeah. This is the second beast, and he had power to give life unto the image of the beast, that the image of the beast should both speak and cause that as many should not worship the image of the beast should be killed. Whether it's AI or it's some other means, regardless, it does bring your mind to that. And we know that in the final days there will be great acts of deception. Is that 2 Thessalonians chapter 2 that we see that? Towards the end of the passage here, that there will be a great deception come upon many. And for this cause, speaking of the tribulation, God shall send them strong delusion that they should believe a lie, that they might be damned who believe not the truth, but have had pleasure in unrighteousness. There will be a degree of delusion that will come to deceive the people, we could maybe even argue somehow block that natural sense of there's something not right about that. So what I would say is, to a degree, go with your gut. I mean, there is a sense in which you can look at a lot of things and you can realize there's something about that is wrong. Maybe it's something that you even had more so when you were younger, that you weren't so, I don't know, desensitized to things, and you could watch something or you could see something and you immediately had that sense of this is not right, this is wrong. And I would say that we can still maintain that sense of things if we don't allow ourselves to become desensitized to it. So, whether you want to go to Philippians chapter 4, talking about dwelling on things that are good and pure and true and righteous, but I think when most people can see things, whether it's AI bringing a murder victim back to life, right? The idea that there he is speaking, giving his own victim's impact statement, we know that it's not right because it's not him. That isn't actually the victim. It is an image, it's putting words in his mouth, and it's probably not the proper and healthy way for a loved one to cope, to respond, to handle the loss of a loved one, right? It's not proper, it's not appropriate, it's not fitting, it's not beneficial. So I would recommend continue to try to recognize those things, okay? Try to be aware of when you see something and you don't feel like there's something right about it. Try to mark and note why that does not seem right, that does not seem appropriate. The way that the way that the Pope, for example, Pope Leo XIV, when he stood out on the balcony and all the people cheered, and he spoke and all the people cheered, was Peter ever regarded in that way? Do we ever have the grounds to say that when Peter spoke, the crowds cheered and referred to Peter as the Holy Father? To me, that is another example. Now, once again, a lot of these people are convinced, strong delusion, maybe not necessarily from the Lord, but just brought up in it, tradition, all those things. But when I look at it and seeing a single man being venerated in that way, and the Catholics might rationalize and say, we're not venerating the man, we're venerating the office. This is the man that God chose, so we're giving glory to God. I think you can recognize it when you see it. All right. So, with that, there's one example of just a recent event. Now, talking about another recent event, this is coming from the Christian Post. The Episcopal Church ends partnership with the U.S. government over white Afrikaners resettlement dispute. I think that's how you say it, Afrikaners. So, essentially, let me explain to you what's going on. The Episcopal Church has had a partnership resettling refugees with the U.S. government, okay? They've done it for quite some time, to my understanding. Now, what the Trump administration wanted to do was to resettle, and this is the number that I heard reported from the Daily Wire, 49 South African refugees. As you know, we've talked about this before. We have a friend from South Africa who sometimes hops on and joins us. They have the white South Africans are facing great persecution, and it really is racially driven. It's not anything other than that. The Episcopal Church presiding Bishop Sean Rowe released a letter on Monday regarding their ministry that oversees the denomination's refugee settlement programs or resettlement programs. This is all coming from Christian Post here. Rowe said the Trump administration had informed them a couple of weeks ago, per the terms of their federal grant, they were expected to help resettle some white Afrikaners from South Africa who had been labeled as refugees under a February executive order that accused South African government of seizing white landowners' agricultural properties without compensation. Afrikaners are a people group that descended mostly from Dutch settlers who arrived in South Africa in the 1600s. And here is the response. This is what Rowe has to say, the bishop over this ministry. In light of our church's steadfast commitment to racial justice and reconciliation and our historic ties with the Anglican Church of Southern Africa, we are not able to take this step, wrote Rowe. Accordingly, we have determined that by the end of the federal fiscal year, we will conclude our refugee resettlement grant agreements with the U.S. federal government. So, here's my thoughts. We have been taking refugees from all sorts of places under less than clear and obvious justified reason. We're taking people from South America who are just claiming refugee status without really any solid grounds. They're genuinely being persecuted for any serious reason. Maybe the cartel is in charge of things and running things, but they kind of let the cartel take over everything. Certainly, it's not like every single refugee status is the result of facing racial persecution. And yet now you have a handful of white Afrikaners who are legitimately seeking a refugee status. And they're being denied help by this Episcopal ministry, which has been in works, agreements, contract with the federal government to do so. And the truth is, this just goes back to the racial theories that it's only the people of color who could ever possibly face discrimination. It's only people of color who could possibly be the recipients of persecution due to their ethnicity. It's quite an ugly thing. Quite an ugly thing, I would say. Shame on them, because if we're going to be taking in refugees, try to give me a better example of a foreign people group that would have a right to seek refugee status. We've been hearing about the suffering of white farmers in South Africa, but obviously they can't really be the recipients of racism because only white people can be racist, not anybody else of any other color. So really quite pitiful. But, you know, the Episcopal Church or churches, denominations, I'm not quite sure how many branches and offshoots of the Episcopalians there are. They've never really been a strong bulwark against progressivism, liberal theory. They're not the most conservative bunch, I would say. So it's not that it's really all that surprising, but it just once again is further evidence that you are permitted to be racist against people as long as their skin is white enough, all right? Or even to a degree, if it's not that their skin is all that white, it's just that maybe they're a little bit too successful, such as, you know, Asians. The rates of Asian crime or crimes made against Asians is somewhat disturbing, and yet you don't really hear about it a whole lot. But anytime it's even possible that maybe a person of color was mistreated by somebody with white skin, well, then it gets all over the news. Just once again, another problem. How about we just treat all people equally and address matters of persecution and injustice when we see it, and not care about who the ethnicity happens to be. So the Episcopalian Church ministry there really just not looking good. All right, before we get into the major segment where I spend most of my time talking about the reason for our study on Abraham, I'm going to read a couple of your comments here just to see if there's any major things of note there before we move on. Captain Silva says, much like the internet, there are positive things may come from the AI age, but much of it will be harmful. This victim impact statement does not look like it will produce much good fruit. I would agree with that. AI may be helpful in some areas, but it's a tool just like anything else. I think you use it, and you're in any country that doesn't use it is going to be at a disadvantage. Goodness, even maybe even to a degree, theologians might be at a disadvantage. I'm telling you, there's some good theologians who have started to make use of it to a degree. I haven't really yet, mostly because I don't want to pay for it. So there's that. Ryan with us today, he agrees that it's not appropriate behavior. Rick says it really gave me a hard knot in the pit of my stomach. That's about the best way to describe it. It just does not sit right with you when you watch it. You know that there is something inherently just not right with it. Robert says, I agree there's a sense of wrongness in this, similar to the idea of trying to clone a specific person. It's like intruding into an area where only God should go. Yep, I agree. And Tom does as well. Captain Silva says, Jesus is the Alpha and Omega. He does not need a successor. Yeah, and to a degree, Catholicism does kind of hold that view. I mean, he's basically the representative of Christ on earth at the time. Rick says what's happening in Africa is reparations gone wild. That's probably a very good way to put it, Rick. Yeah, it's kind of the natural conclusion. Jerry says, do you believe Paul became a member of the little flock before he received the revelation of the mystery and became the prototype of the body of Christ? Jerry, that's an interesting question, one that I probably should speak at longer. But in short, I'm going to say yes. I take the controversial mid-Acts view, I guess, to some degree, that when I see Paul in Acts chapter 9, it looks like a man who is doing the ministry work of the kingdom to Jewish people. I don't think I'm seeing the mystery yet. And I think that there's some good reasons to point to that. Some of Paul's testimony concerning his baptism, concerning when he's talking to King Agrippa, speaking of the kingdom. I think I got that right, Agrippa. So with all of that being said, yeah, I think that Paul actually was a member of the little flock, and I think that's why you've got to some degree, rightly divide Paul. When you're reading his epistles, I know that we would love it if it was so simple as just, hey, Romans through Philemon, take all that, you can directly apply it. But the truth is, even the right dividers that would say, no, Romans through Philemon, Paul had no ministry at all to the Jews, they're still going to rightly divide Romans 9 through 10, probably even Romans 9 through 11. So they're going to rightly divide Paul to some degree and acknowledge, hey, yeah, over there he's talking to Israel. And they would even, point to the book of 1 Corinthians, 2 Corinthians, where Paul speaks of prophecy and tongues and all those things. And they're at least going to have, some cessationist type take on the whole matter. So you're going to rightly divide Paul whether you like the term or not. And it just kind of depends on how far you're going to divide it. I just think that either, there's the Acts 28ers, who I don't think are correct. I think that you run into some issues if you take the Acts 28 view. Then there are like the Acts 9ers who I understand the appeal to making things very simple, but I think sometimes you can oversimplify things and it can lead to trouble. And I think the Acts 13 view is really the way to go and rightly divide Paul in his ministry in Acts and in the epistles. So Jerry, there's my thoughts there. Thanks, Rick. Rick mentioned us having a happy anniversary, and we did. We had a good weekend, except for one hike that maybe we were a little bit too ambitious on and decided to go a little bit too far. Ryan says, so Mark, what season of Abraham will be on tomorrow night? It's going to be session 4, and we're going to see him go down to Egypt. So now that Ryan asked the question, let me go ahead and dive into it. The reason why I am studying Abraham. So let me go ahead and share with you the image for you, just so you're good and familiar with it. But I'm doing a Wednesday night study on Abraham, and it's called Studying Abraham, Finding the Biblical Truth. And the reason why I titled it that is there are just so many claims, assumptions, and ideas about what the narrative of Abraham is really all about. And I think the major mistake that is made is we go to Galatians, we go to Romans, James, maybe even Hebrews, and we start there. That's how we get introduced to Abraham. And then we take everything that Galatians, Romans, all of those have to say about Abraham, and then take it and read it into Genesis chapters 12 through 20 something, okay? That's what we do with Abraham. And I think it's been the result of a lot of bad theology. I think that Calvinism has really been a major offender of this. But evangelicals are guilty of it as well. Maybe even to a degree right dividers, okay? Right dividers may have made some assumptions, drawn some conclusions of what they read in Galatians or Romans. They wouldn't do with James because they rightly divide James and understand that that's obviously for Israel. But I think what we got to do, the solution to getting Abraham right, and this is my theory, and that's why you're going to follow along with me, and it's going to take some commitment for you. It really will. We're going to do this. Let me share with you my objective. And if you have not seen my study, I've been introducing my objective for the Abraham study this entire time, okay? And let me go and pull it up for you. I want to read to you my specific objective for the Abraham study and explain to you my thoughts on how I'm going to approach Abraham, and then hopefully at least understand what I'm trying to do with this, okay? So, here it is. So the objective. The purpose of this study is to understand Abraham according to biblical testimony, okay? That is the primary focus. We are just going to understand Abraham according to what the Bible says. I am not going to be relying heavily on commentaries from preachers of today. I'm going to be focused on what the Bible says, all right? So we're starting where Abraham is first mentioned, and he's not even Abraham at that point, he's Abram. So we're starting in Genesis 11, and then moving into Genesis 12, which we're in now, and we're going to work our way through. The probably the longest section of this entire study was just going to be getting to know Abraham and what happened in his life, the promises made, the events that took place, all of those things, the interactions he had with God, the interactions he had with others. and we're going to get the biblical testimony. Now, one thing we're going to do is I am going to consider in large part, well, in large part, it's not really the term I want to use. I will look at some extra sources occasionally, but it's not going to be probably what you think. I'm not going to go and cite well-known theologians of today's time or years past, all right? I'm not going to look at MacArthur, Sproul, Spurgeon. I'm not going to look at any of those. What I am going to do is I'm going to look at rabbis, and specifically early rabbis, Rashi primarily, and see what they have to say, because the truth is, most of the Christian writings and resources on Abraham is making the mistake I think that they're guilty of, and it is going to Romans and Galatians and all those first, and letting that set the tone and set the stage for reading Abraham in Genesis. And I think that's not how you do it. I think that is opposite. I think God gave His order of revelation for a reason, and what do we have first? We don't have Paul talking about Abraham in Romans. We don't have the writing in Galatians, Hebrews, all of that. What we have is we have the narrative of Genesis, the Genesis account and record of Abraham. So that's what we're going to do. And the reason why Jewish rabbis can be of help is because guess what? They're not reading Romans and Galatians. They're not taking that and then reading it into the Genesis narrative. They're going to give some commentary. They're going to give some thoughts. And one of the major things that we've been talking about is the whole conflict being set up between Abraham and Nimrod or Amraphel, who I think are one and the same. You would never really get that in a lot of Christian commentaries because they're not worried about it. They're too busy focused on what Romans and Galatians says. But we're really digging into just what Genesis has to say. We're going to study Genesis very carefully, very analytically, and see what it has to say for us. So that's what we're doing. And then here's the premise of the study. The premise of the study is that one must comprehend the events and details of Abraham's life before one can properly interpret any and all references to him. That's my take. I think you need to understand Abraham inside and out, know the events, know the order, know the details, before you can ever go to the book of Romans and Galatians and make sense of what they're trying to say. I think a lot of people know more about Abraham from Romans and Galatians than they ever do about the actual narrative, biblical account of Abraham. So that's my premise. Now, it's my premise. A premise is an assumption. You know our good friend Dr. Wright. Oh man, he's going to give me a hard time for that one. He's right most of the time unless he disagrees with me. But our good friend Dr. White, he says question the assumptions. I would encourage you, question them, but see if you disagree with my logic, because that's my logic, that we need to comprehend the events and details of Abraham's life before we can ever go to the references about him and properly understand them. And so we're going to spend a lot of time in Genesis. Then and only then, once we've covered Abraham's life and we note the details, we note the promises, we note the events, we note all the good and the bad, then and only then, once the foundational record of Abraham is established, the biblical references will be analyzed. And we'll see what are the biblical references saying in light of Genesis, in light of what it has to say about Abraham's life. Okay? That is going to be my approach. Okay? That's going to be my strategy. And the reason why I think that's important is because when you look at how the rest of the Christian world and theologians approach Abraham, they'll speak to some degree about Abraham's life and events that unfolded and, how he became the father of the nation of Israel and all of that. But what happens is when you try to get a preacher's take, explanation, opinion on Abraham, what you get is, you get this. So this is the Got Questions article on Abraham. You've got, like, for example, here's the question, okay, posed to Got Questions. As you know, Got Questions is the flagship website for the evangelical answer. So who was Abraham? And so you get the whole narrative here about Abraham They're already jumping to Galatians, though, right off the bat there. Believers in all generations are called the children of Abraham. Throwing in kind of a really deep theological statement early on is probably not a good thing. You probably should start with the basis of who Abraham is before you start trying to make broad statements that could lead to some incorrect assumptions and conclusions. But he begins here, and they do talk about the life of Abraham. And then you read here, look, we're already jumping to Hebrews. The author of Hebrews uses Abraham as an example of faith several times. Kind of starts doing a little bit of eisegesis to a degree. How many of us would leave behind everything that is familiar to us and go without knowing our destination? So kind of putting ourselves in that position just a little bit. Talks about the birth of Isaac. Starts a little bit of reference to Hebrews there. Galatians here. Once again, they're weaving in Galatians and Hebrews, and probably going to see a little bit of Romans. Maybe we already did. I'm not sure. And so, one obvious lesson to draw from Abraham's life is we're to live a life of faith. So there you go. So that's all that right there is what they committed to Abraham's actual historical account. For the most part, they probably left out quite a few things. But now here we go. Here's the lesson, right? About living a life of faith, doing what God tells us to do. Abraham's life also shows us the blessings of simple obedience. We also see from Abraham what it looks like to have an active relationship with God. So there we go, just reading ourselves into the whole thing. And then here we get to this part, and this is the major point that I wanted to note. And I actually read it in session 1. I may have read it in session 2 of our Abraham study as well. But here's the major thing. Theologically speaking, so who is Abraham theologically? Abraham's life is a living example of the doctrine of sola fide, justification by faith alone. And that's going to be the major takeaway, that Abraham's justified by faith, justified by faith, justified by faith, the same way that anybody ever has been saved, justification by faith alone. Got Questions takes a very anti-dispensational view of the salvation we have offered to us today. And note how I'm wording that. The salvation we have offered to us today. All right, it is a unique thing. Okay, it's a unique thing that we have, I would say. But twice the Apostle Paul uses Abraham as an example of this crucial doctrine. In Romans, the entire 4th chapter is devoted to illustrating justification by faith through the life of Abraham. A similar argument is made in the book of Galatians, where Paul shows from Abraham's life that Gentiles are heirs with the Jews to the blessings of Abraham through faith. This all goes back to Genesis 15:6. Abraham did nothing to earn justification. His trust in God was enough. So that's where they go. They really let statements in Romans and Galatians become the entire theme and the thesis of Abraham's life. That's what it's all about. Abraham's entire story is just about salvation by faith alone, rather than so many things that took place. And maybe if they would read the whole narrative, they would realize that statement in Genesis 15:6 is a very significant statement, but it's not the whole thing. There's a whole lot that happens and there's a whole lot that is said and that is done by both Abraham and God. And they're missing the forest for the trees that they see in Romans and Galatians. I think so. Not that those trees aren't important, not those trees aren't significant to note, but there is an overall bigger picture going on with Abraham, and you will miss out on a lot of things. That's probably why the idea of dispensationalism, a future for Israel still, the promises and all of those things are being laughed at, ignored, and neglected. So we're going to look and see. I mean, and Abraham's also mentioned in the Gospels. We're going to have to go to the Gospel of John and in a number of other places to look at the testimony and the references here. We'll have to go to Romans 9, and we'll have to work through Romans 9. It's going to be an extensive study. It really is. Because, I mean, it's going to be one of The last day's study I'm doing on Sunday mornings is quite exhaustive because it started like a year ago nearly, and it includes an entire reading through Revelation. This is maybe going to be even more so. And this will require maybe some of the heaviest theological thinking. Well, one of the things I've often said is Revelation is a perplexing book. In some ways, it's a little bit mysterious because you're trying to piece things together and understand, but it's not a hard book. And by what I mean is, if you just take it for what it says in its literal understanding, it's not difficult to follow what is going on. You may not fully grasp every detail. It may be, like I said, perplexing, but you can follow along. And Revelation is not one of the most difficult books in the Bible. What is very difficult is understanding Abraham and getting correct all the references to Abraham. I think that is truly a biblical endeavor. And Wednesday night is going to be when it goes down, when it happens. We've already been doing it. And we've got to do all the groundwork first. We've got to get to know Abraham, and then we are going to dive into all those references, and we're going to get it right. That's what my striving, my effort to do is. One of the resources I am using, I'm not going to lie, and I would be silly not to. One of the resources I'm using to help get some background, and not that I'm doing everything like he does. A lot of it I'm charting my own path, going my own way, but there are a number of things that I'm making note of in Dr. White's study of Abraham. Let me see, where is it? Here it is. The Life and Times of Abraham. It's a 20-session study over the life and times of Abraham. And that's really what he's doing. He's just focusing on the events and the things that take place with Abraham's life. We'll probably do 20 or so sessions similar of the life and times of Abraham. But what we're going to do is, after we do that, then we're going to jump into probably almost as equally long of a study, maybe a little bit shorter, of all the references to Abraham. Okay? It might be a little bit shorter because we've done a lot of the groundwork. And that's the way I want to do it. I could have started in the Gospels and said, okay, here's the first reference to Abraham. Now let's go back and build in the background information. But I don't want to do that first. I want to get to know Abraham, and then I can just dive straight in to all of the times that he's referenced. And we've already done our homework for the life of Abraham, and it'll help us answer the questions, doing it in the order that the Bible's been revealed. But this is an excellent study on the life and times of Abraham by Dr. White. I would recommend checking it out. He does a very good job, and he also makes note of a lot of the rabbinical teachings and traditions. Some of them, maybe you would put a lot of weight on, and then some of them you may not feel the need to emphasize very heavily. Okay, so that's why I want to study Abraham. I think that the Calvinists believe they have Abraham as a clear exemplar for God's election, for sola fide, all of those things. And even non-dispensationalists or even weak dispensationalists think that Abraham is the clear, cut and dry example that people have always been saved by believing the gospel, justified by faith, not of works, lest anyone should boast. I think that we're making a lot of assumptions. And I think that we would do well to just get to know Abraham first. That's my motivation there for studying Abraham. All right, let's see here. I'm going to look at a few of your comments here. Toby says Acts 28ers are the smallest group and they love the Companion Bible. Yeah, they do. The Companion Bible does have a Acts 28 slant. It does. But don't throw the baby out with the bathwater. The Companion Bible still is a great tool. Mine's sitting right over there. And it is very useful. And there may be a few times in which you'll hear me reference some of Bullinger's notes when it comes to Abraham, because Bullinger's not going to make some of those mistakes either. Robert says, Galatians 1:23, for a long time I have wrestled with the question brought up by Jerry. Oh yeah, the one of Paul, was he a part of the little flock? Robert says, I think a strong case going through his own, Paul going through his own time of transition. Yeah, I would agree. I would agree with that. I think that's what you see. It's a difficult progression in the life of somebody who discovers and comes to right division, because what right division does is it simplifies the Bible instantly. It makes the Bible so much more simple. And I know that some would disagree with that, those that hold to salvation always being by grace through faith. But then you have to start really getting away from a literal interpretation and a plain sense meaning of the Bible in order to make that work. Always, when you come to right division, there is that great sense of relief. The Bible just makes sense now. And the problem is, you have the initial thing and you're like, wow, I understand it. And then you start reading Paul some more and you think, wow, that doesn't sound like our gospel. Over here in Acts, it sounds, to a degree, in this particular passage of Acts, sounds like Paul's doing Jewish kingdom stuff. Over here in Corinthians, it sounds like kingdom stuff. Maybe even over in Thessalonians, there's some kingdom stuff. What's going on here? And you do get put in a position where you have to say, either I keep it simple, stupid, and keeping it simple is an important thing. Don't get me wrong. It's, if the plain sense makes common sense, seek no other sense, otherwise you wind up with nonsense. Heard that from Dr. Wright before. There is that, but sometimes keeping it simple is not the correct thing. And you've got to just embrace that, okay, we've simplified a lot, but there's some work still yet to do. And I think some right dividers they don't want to complicate things. And so they're willing to deal with and live with some of the more conflicting things that Paul has to say and come up with a solution to those. And hey, that's better than 99% of all the others, right? But I think what I would encourage them to do, don't become an Acts 28er. I don't see a strong case to do that. What I would recommend is think, Paul started out just acknowledging Jesus was his Messiah and conveying that to the Jewish churches about. And it's not until he had that vision in the temple, he was in the Spirit, that there was a new thing. And when we see that, when he's sent out of the temple by God in the Spirit on the Lord's Day, that's when that guy was caught up in the third heaven and heard things and was sent to the Gentiles with a brand new message. I think that's what you're going to find. As I would recommend, one of the things I did in my Philippians study is I took a break of doing Philippians verse by verse, because we got to a point in Philippians where I did think that we needed to start rightly dividing Paul. And I wanted to go ahead and, sorry, I played a little bit of a video there and it made the ad. But there's two sessions that I want people to watch. And I think maybe two of the most important sessions that I have done as far as understanding the Acts 13 rightly dividing Paul position. And it's these two right here, Philippians session 15 and Philippians session 16. Getting to know Paul, and Philippians session 16, when did Paul receive the mystery? I think those are two of the most important. Unfortunately, I don't know how well they've done. Like, when did Paul receive the mystery? That one is sitting at 53 views. And so I would encourage you to, if you want to see the days when I was rocking the stash, you need to tune in and watch that one, because that one's some of the most important, I think, as far as getting a good grasp on Paul and his ministry, especially in the book of Acts. Ryan says, we know that Paul's apostles are Romans. Paul's epistles are Romans through Philemon, but do Genesis first. We don't want to. Yeah, that's why I'm going to do Genesis first. Get the groundwork laid there. Ryan supports the idea of getting to know Abraham first. So if Ryan's for it, I'm for it too. Great to have everybody else here with us. Tom, always enjoy you. Paul, great to have you. Let's see here. Mary, always fun to know that you are with us and glad you're still enjoying it. Ken, great to have you. Not sure where my mom is today. I don't know if she's off doing other things, traveling the world and whatnot. Ken's with us. Jay, once again, appreciate you being a part of the discussion and sharing your insight and your thoughts. Sydney, great to see or hear from you again. Hopefully you can come back and see us in Texas sometime, or from Texas sometime soon. Kitty, great to have you. Hope you're doing good with your new grandchild. Well, everyone, I think that's all I've got for you today. Don't have much else too pressing. What we are going to be doing is on Sundays, we're going to be starting a new study. Not quite sure what I'm going to title it yet. Shame on me. But it's going to be something along the lines of practical church something. I don't know. But we're going to talk about basic things for church ministry. I am a preacher of a church after all, so I'm sorry, not everything can be dedicated to, non-church things. But it will be a good one because I hope that it serves as a doctrinal basis for how a congregation should conduct itself in our age, and hopefully it'll be some good, sound doctrine. I hope you can come join us sometime in person. I know I always like to have you online. But if you ever want to come out and see us, let us know. We've got a number of people who are willing to accommodate you, okay? It'd be great to me, if we haven't met you in person, would love to have you in person as well. If you ever want to reach out to me, please feel free to contact me, markbazeministries.org. And so, with all of that, Rick says, I forgot about you being off for the weekend and Monday. When I couldn't find you or anybody else, I thought maybe I had been left behind. Never know. You never know. But no, I'm still here. Now maybe we're all left behind. Who knows where everybody else went? Anybody know where, I don't know. Does anybody know where Joel Osteen is today? That was mean. Paul, the meeting is over. Now you got to rewind. Well, that's all right, Paul. Glad that you're going to be able to come back and listen with us. All right, let me turn the volume down so I don't blow out your eardrums like I did last time. Everybody, this has been Shields and Arrows. We are back to business now. We'll be going live again tomorrow for more things. We'll also be getting ready for our Abraham study. I was working on it this morning. I'll work on it some more later, work on it tomorrow, and then we'll be ready to present to you pure masculine testosterone-fueled Bible study, all right? How's that sound? Well, thank y'all so much. We'll see you all tomorrow.